Welcome to the Holy Spirit's Curriculum of Joy podcast. My name is Wanaka Oberhuber, and I'm your host. My guest today is Sue Anne Okerwall Knoblauch. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Wonderful. Great to have you.
It is great to be here with everyone in the one sonship mind, right?
Yes, indeed. So, I would like to start by asking you a very broad question.
Okay.
What was your life like before you got to know A Course in Miracles, and what changed in your mind when you did?
Oh,
And what has happened since?
that's a beautiful question. Yes. Because I was wondering if you'd want to hear my little story, or I always say it's a little story because, it's a story and an illusion, but it really does help people to place themselves, where their story is and get understanding. But yeah, so I
Yes.
actually am back with the Course of Miracles since 1989 is about the best I can remember. Um, 88 or not 89, but I've been calling it 89. And no one ever really, if it's that far back, you're not really knowing, you know, exactly what date it was. But I was in back then they were called metaphysical bookstores. Metaphysics was like the wording, New Age was the wording. And I had already been searching for this type of thing, and loved to talk to Jesus in my mind when I was a kid. Was raised Christian, an Episcopalian church, but so as you know, everything in your life leads forward through a path. And I always say that Holy Spirit is always intimately working in our mind, even before we knew of any tools. It was always there because, the tools are just tools. So yeah, and it was funny because we were in this bookstore and all the books were like they were calling out to us, with rainbows and angels and beautiful colors all over them, and incense was burning, and I think bells were ringing. It was just a nice experience of a place to be. And then there were these three very deep blue books and because they were so nondescript and almost looking like a copy of the Bible, that attracted my attention probably more. And I asked my friend, like, what are these? I don't even know why I asked her. We were just talking, and then she said that everyone that she had known that was reading that didn't need anything else. So that was probably the start of my journey, because I was like, very intriguing statement. I said, I've got to have that, and so my life probably before that was a lot of seeking and very, very fearful. And if I remember back in my real early childhood, and if I see pictures of myself, it's really funny because I really like me. I look at me and like I'm the most interesting and happiest looking person at the little birthday party with all these other girls or whatever. And uh, there was a time when I think I was just really connected with spirit mind, and people would come to me and tell me that there were problems. Like my mother would come to me and tell me there was a problem, or um, you know, or the teacher. And I would be so in like this bubble of just joy that it was like a shriek almost for me. I remember this, that it was just crazy that I didn't understand what problems were really, really early on. So this is probably up to like age 9 or something. And then I started becoming much more with the world, and I began to say, well, if all these people are saying that there's problems, then I better like pay attention to those. And I think also I noticed that I wanted people to like me and give me back good feedback. So I wanted to please them, going outwards, as if there was this outwards of energy and this inwards of energy, right? So then in 89, I'm like about 25 or something, and I get these books. And as many people say that they read these and they just really, um, it's such heavy, I don't know if you call it prose. It's an iambic pentameter, and there's a lot of double negatives. And I actually was looking for some affirmations and some positives, and it was heavy. It wasn't about that. There was a few like passages in there, but mostly like what this ego thing is doing. And I'm like, I don't even know what they're talking about. I guess I didn't even read clarification of terms or anything at the end. I just dove right in the text, and it was like, what is this? And of course, it starts out with its most deepest principles, the 50 miracle principles, and they're talking in a metaphysics that you have to understand what they're meaning. So, as many people talk about in their journey, they finally get some kind of a tool. Um, and it was different back then. There was no internet. There was certainly no Telegram, no Zoom, no Facebook. There wasn't even email, I don't think. And so you had to get like a DVD. You had to get there wasn't even a CD, I don't think back then. And you had to buy books. So everything was very self study, and I self studied for about 15 years. I just never could put it away, even though I kind of didn't know what it was saying. And then I finally got a tool, which for me happened to be Disappearance of the Universe, one of Gary Renard's his first book, actually. And but it could be many different tools. But that tool enabled me to understand the course more in a linear fashion. So then I was able to read that book many times, and then go back to the course. And I've highlighted and underlined it so many times. I've probably been through both the old copy and then the new copy maybe like 8 times or something, over the years. I mean, this has been like 33 years, so it's a long time. And so as I was uh, uh, I begin to now look back and I see that, like, so there's sort of like a phase one, and these are not listed in the book. This is not part of, the uh, 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 development of trust section where they talk about the different stages that we go through. But nonetheless, I found that many of us go through the beginning, where phase one, just for lack of a better word to call it, where we don't know what it's saying, and then phase two, where we get some kind of a tool and we can begin to understand the metaphysical principles. Like when it says ego, what is it talking about? And who is Jesus as compared to like a biblical religious version? And it is actually different. It's different definition, different way of being, everything. So all of that I had to come to understand. And then in that time period, I did the workbook finally all the way through. But I always say I was the worst workbook student because I barely would read it, and then I would hardly do anything with it for that day. But I followed its directions of don't do more than one lesson a day. And it took me a little more than 365 days. I've stayed on a couple for a few days, let's say. And uh, what's interesting about that is I remember then Ken Wapnick later saying that sometimes the worst workbook student is the best because you're looking at your resistance to doing the darn thing. And so I was like, I just, I was very resistant. So I had this tool to understand, and so I'm calling that like phase two, where many of us then align our beliefs with what the metaphysics are saying. And we're saying, okay, yeah, maybe I can believe that this place is an illusion and that there is no world. Um, and, that there's a Jesus trying to talk to me, and that there's another way of being or something. You're sort of getting a taste of some of these ideas, but they're maybe more intellectual. Of course, I didn't know any of this at the time. I just was reading, I was doing. I began to join like a group. I think Facebook kind of came along. So that was like a 12-year period all in here. Um, and then around 2016, I was actually at a Gary Renard workshop, and he was really stressing how that we have to, or not we have to, but like, that his guides were telling him to put out there that forgiveness is like where it's at. Forgiveness is how you return to the decision maker in your mind, and that's the power point. That's the place where you can affect any kind of change, and that trying to do it here in the world is not effective. And I resonated with that because I was at a place of knowing that. And much of this comes from, the mind just being ready, and you almost can't rush the process. And, someone's phase one of not knowing what the book says could be one day. It could be 10 years. It could be 15, like it was for me. It could be anything, right? That's why I always say Holy Spirit is leading me and everyone intimately in our minds, which is the only thing that we are. So that's the only place that we can ever make any change. So I was like, okay, I'm getting this. Okay, I'm going to try this. And so that was I would call phase 3 or whatever. It was just the next step. So I started to do it, but very poorly. Like, like, help me with this stuff, and but I would go in my mind, but there was a passion of just a wanting to not be in the pain and the fear that I was in. And a lot of it looked like it was attached to things in the world that were going on, whether it be worldly, government, or just in my own family life. Some of it was just generalized anxiety. And I just wake up in such terror that I almost couldn't put my foot on the floor and get out of bed. So all of that really, I would say those probably like symptoms or signs that one is so ready and had been knowing that the world just no longer worked. So there had to be a better way. Um, and even through all this process, there was some things that came to me that weren't like they're talked about a little bit in the course, but they're not focused on, because the course is really like a level that takes you out of space and time to God thought, and to be in what I would call Holy Spirit mind, or the holy instant. So, but I had become aware that I could talk to people who were no longer alive. I could talk to sometimes people who were still alive, like in their mind. I could empathically sometimes feel a pain they were having, or sometimes I could see the future. All these like supposedly like psychic abilities, right? Um, I was never really waylaid on any of those, or decided to make a living out of that, or I had a regular kind of job, and this was almost like a separate life in a way at that time. But many of those things did come along, and they're still with me now, and it's things that I'm aware of. But I found out that when one is in the one sonship mind that is outside of time and space, it's really like the Buddha mind. When he said, I am awake, he realized he was the dreamer of the dream. And so in that, um, uh, I also used to call it the place where everybody's talking, because you could literally almost dial your mind, like and you could, it's not really requesting information. It's not really turning a radio dial, but you could become aware of things. And I also found that one would become mostly aware of things that were needed for one to move on spiritually. So, like, for instance, I do not get technical information like my husband gets, about he does car engines, and he changes them in this way of being like a mad scientist, right? And he propels his way of living and that industry forward, right? But I don't get those kind of things. I get more like uh, what are other people thinking, and then how is it, are there people really out there? And that's what Holy Spirit is always teaching me now. So I'll just finish that off with so I was doing the forgiveness and doing it very poorly. And I say poorly only because I could kind of see some of the steps were missing, and I didn't really know it. And Holy Spirit literally had to show me. And I didn't read any books. There are some out there where people will talk about their process of forgiveness and what's the difference between true forgiveness and regular forgiveness. So, true forgiveness, you're actually going to realize there is absolutely no world, nothing ever happened, and you're still in the heart of God, never having left and dreaming of exile. That's what this world is, dreaming of exile. So then you somehow have to live here, in like this supposedly exile place. So how do you walk around and see yourself and be? Um, so uh, in the forgiveness process, I learned that first you have to um, realize that you're not in peace. And most of us have been so used to being in ego and constant upsets all day long. Like I mentioned, just fear would be permeating every decision I made, every place I looked, everything. I'd made that, actually I'd made that decision in my mind and didn't even know I'd made it. So it becomes like it's like a default thought system. And I love to call it the ego. I love to call it the ego thought system because it's not us. And yet, if one thinks with it, you will be so immersed in it, you will think you are it, and you will not know there is anything else, because that's what the splits do. When you split, supposedly in a separation, you have no memory of what you were before. That's part of how all that works. And so you're like stuck over here on the other side, and you're like, I know there was a God, and I know I used to be there somehow, but now I know absolutely nothing. And I don't know what I am. I don't know what to do. And I'm barely getting along in the world, and I'm learning some things of like, how do you make a living? How do you have a mate to be with? How do you how do you have a child if that's what you do? And so it was interesting struggle. So I first would realize that I'm not in my peace, and that most of the time I wasn't. So I had to realize, wow, okay, there's something that's not that. I thought that was normal. And then one has to go, I found out, but it took like about 5 years or 4 years or so to that when one goes to Holy Spirit, one has to literally go with nothing left of yourself. So the more you have of oneself, the ego self, it's fine. You can bring it along with you, and you usually bring your answers with you. So I bring my answers with me, and I'd be like, help. Help it so that my job pays more. I'm just going to pick something out of the air, right? Help it so my job pays more. And then Holy Spirit's over there. Like if Holy Spirit was like a human sitting there, and knowing what he does, and know that knowingness of spirit, he would be like saying, you just told me that you believe there's a world, you believe there's pay, you believe there's jobs, you believe there's money, and I'm trying to tell you there's no world at all. So when I tell you there's no world at all, you're going to hear an answer you're not expecting or wanting. I wanted to be fixed here in the world. So then that's where forgiveness sometimes goes astray. And it talks about that in rules for decision. There's a beautiful little section on the second page of that talks about, that we'll become very angry because we'll hear that the true answer is not what we were wanting to hear. So then I had to learn through that to like let go of like everything I ever thought of myself or anything I ever thought as a person, an ego, of a world, and go like almost like it's as complete a blank slate as you can, and for this other answer to be written there that's so completely different is about the best way I can explain it. And it is definitely an experience. So then you have an experience, and it's somewhat like of a download of like a knowing, and you're like, wow, there's no problems here, and there's just like one thought, and there's no opposing thoughts. It's just good. There's no bad coming at you. Okay, this is like really interesting. And so you're like there. And then as you go along and learn, you begin to realize that that's where you've always been, and that becomes stronger in your mind. And at the same time, you're undoing the ego thought system. That's kind of the wording that was in Disappearance of the Universe. That you're undoing all this stuff that's been buried little bit by little bit. You wouldn't want to do it all at once. You'd freak out and jump back and say, I'm not going to do the course till next lifetime. You'd be like, ah. But so meanwhile, but if you do it little bit by little bit with every little thing that comes up in your face, and I love that, talks about that in Disappearance of the Universe, so very wise um, advice, and do it as you can handle it. And then, the deepening comes of knowing where you really are. And more time is spent in your mind during the day there. And then you'll pop out, you'll go back in your normal self, like what had been normal. And then you'll catch it quicker, because you have to notice you're not in peace, not think anything you've ever thought before. And then the Holy Spirit will give you these answers. And but it's literally, it's like sometimes you have to tease them apart over time, because it's like a bubble. I don't even know how to explain it, but I know y'all have heard it. I know y'all have seen it. Everybody has this connection, and it's nothing special. That's what's the really cool thing too, because someone just today on on a Facebook Course in Miracles page had mentioned that they were very uncomfortable with the way that I would type and speak, and that in their perception, from their viewpoint, they had thought that I was saying that I was special and separate and had something that they did not have. Like I'm the only one that has a connection to Holy Spirit. And so then I constantly talk about, and the reason I talk is because I'm teaching myself and strengthening the ideas inside myself. So I spoke back to the symbol of this beautiful person who said that about how that, you know, the one sonship split into all these seeming little pieces. And there's not even a one sonship, actually, there's only just God. But if we pretended that we left and we were separate, that first one sonship then split into all these pieces that we see today. And so each one of us is like a hero of our own dream, looking out through our eyeballs at what appears to be a world coming back at us, and thinking with this default ego thought system that things are out to get us, and that we have to protect ourselves, and sometimes we have to attack first. That's the whole ego way of sin, guilt, and fear. And that is how it's set up to be opposites. And I always say, because if you leave home where God was and he had no opposite, you have to do something different. If you do the same thing as him, then you never really left. And again, like I said, we never really left, but we are reviewing in our mind as if we did a script that was answered in a millisecond and rolled back in, but now we're reviewing along a script. And so that's why we can sometimes see the future, because we're not really seeing the future and we're not really getting guidance. We're being told what's next. And so in my forgivenesses, I would ask Holy Spirit, why do I see sometimes a little bit of the future? And then he would say, well, because it already happened. And okay, well, why would you want to show me some have already happened? Why don't you just show me, like, why don't I just do stuff right in this second? Why do I sometimes know what's happening at dinner time? And he would say, so that you don't resist. And I'd be like, what do you mean? You don't I don't resist. And then he said, well, so you don't resist looking with me, because being a mind, and now as if we're reviewing a projected script like a movie, we're only going to be looking at it with that ego thought system or with him in God thought. So we're doing one or the other, and that apparently is our only choice. And when we're reading the Course in Miracles, it actually says that in a number of places, but it's very, very deep, difficult things. The mind has to be ready for these types of ideas to move forward into, going through the different stages. So that then I was asked to speak, like, or actually, and I didn't even want to use the word speak or teach. I just wanted to use the word talk. So I would hear speech or talk. I mean, or teach, excuse me, and then I would reject that. And so what y'all can hear is what I do is I intimately talk in my mind, and it's the decision maker that's talking, because the ego doesn't know anything and doesn't know any questions to ask, right? So it's the decision maker that's intimately talking with this higher presence. It's actually me that is in my mind that never forgot heaven. And then this me is the big me that's all of us. So I'm intimately asking these questions. So I forgot what that question was that I just was asking. I asked about resistance, and oh, and I told you about seeing, quote unquote, seeing the future. About actually talking what Holy Spirit was saying. And what he specifically said was to show what the experience is of being in Holy Spirit mind. And that was kind of the wording he used. This holy instant, this atonement, uh, describe that and show your process as you're waking up. And he said many talk about it before, many talk about it after, but it's really good to hear someone going through it. And then I was still very resistant. I said, I'm going to get attacked. I just know it. I'm going to get attacked, and I don't want to do it, And this was like about 2 weeks of this going back and forth, and then it was like, I don't know, just somehow I knew to look at page 1 of the introduction, of Manual for Teachers. And that one page is like such a miracle for me because it tells me that I'm only ever teaching myself and that you can never give to anyone else. And this you learn by teaching. So then I was in agreement. Okay, I'm teaching myself. And yes, I want to teach myself more than anything in the world. I want to be in God. I mean, that is that's what I want. I want to be home and that's it. So, and the desire to have that, every mind will come to that. But it's after one experiences the world and does every darn single thing you could try to do, from all the good stuff to all the bad stuff until you finally realize it's all just the same. And then it's like cardboard. Nothing ever satisfies anymore. That all goes by. Then you go into a phase where you're wanting to uh, uh, tell everybody how the world doesn't work. And you kind of go through that and you're telling yourself how it doesn't work, how it doesn't work. And then finally you're ready to be like a little child and just like let go and say, show me what does work. I'm tired of trying to bring my answers to it. And that's my story. You like my story?
Yeah, I mean, of course, in miracles, or one says that the story, I guess, is just there for teaching purposes. Otherwise, you don't even remember it.
Exactly. Yes. Yes, for sure. So yeah, so once we're all in God, which is where we already are. But so when the memory of that comes, and what's that beautiful line in the course that talks about where we will we're no longer be seen, but will be known. And it has a couple other beautiful lines, like a poem, just really, really gorgeous. And it will completely forget that we had dreamed of any of this. Yep.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your story. And I think one of the main points you were making is this resistance to actually sharing. And I think that's a very important one. We have writers here in the group as well. And I know you write a lot on Facebook, so you're very prolific in your writing. And this is a
Yes.
very important topic, to actually allow what
Yeah.
Holy Spirit or the inner voice wants to share, right?
Totally. Yes. Yes. And it becomes uh, an interesting situation, more learning as one does it, of how to let that flow out and how you be that which you're writing, which is definitely not the little Sue Anne personality. And you could see the quality of it, and the depth of it is not anything that like a human would just say. And there's a non-duality about it, and it's always leveling up to the highest part, because that's what Holy Spirit's always doing to me. He's like, oh no, you're not doing that. And I'm like, think even higher, think even higher. There's no one here, there's no one, like even if I try to have an inkling of anything a little bit lower, he's always trying to bring me up. So wherever anyone is, writing and sharing actually teaches yourself. That's what you're doing. And as we know, ideas leave not their source, which is a great line in the course. And that means basically that these thoughts are already there and we're going to be strengthening them. You actually don't strengthen them because they're one quality of allness, 100%, right? But we're dropping the barriers to remembering these ideas. The more we repeat them and the more we say them. So oftentimes people will think that that I'm attacking them, or they'll be grateful. There'll be a whole range of things. They'll disagree, they'll agree partially, all different things. But actually none of that matters. Each one of them, for them, that matters, because where they are, again, they're intimately reviewing everything with Holy Spirit in their minds on their path. And so sometimes reminding them of this is a good kind of separation, that what they hear from me or any teacher, any writing, good, bad, indifferent, whatever, because like sometimes we'll watch an awful movie, and yet it will teach us something, a violent movie. I mean, you'd be like, okay, I maybe shouldn't be doing that thing, but anything can be of learning. And so then when you take that back into your mind, intimately with the Holy Spirit and you ask, what does this mean? May I see it through your eyes? How do you see this? May I think with your thoughts? That's what I usually try to say, because I don't want to think with my thoughts. I just want to know what I say he, but I want to know what those thoughts are. And so when people do that, then they'll be sorting out for themselves. They're doing their own curriculum. That's also on page one of Introduction, a manual for teachers, that we set our curriculum. And it really goes very well with I rule my mind, which I alone must rule. So we're making a choice. And then when we speak out about that, then it's a demonstration, is really all it is. And that someone else can make the same choice. Now, if I watch someone and they're not making the choice of that, here in August of 2021, all minds have already made the choice. We're just looking at one little spot in time, like a snapshot of everybody, like a candid shot, right? Like people are like at a museum or something, and there's somebody sitting down, looking at a painting. There's somebody, like looking at their phone. You're snapped a picture of people in all different thoughts and ways, right? And so when one thinks of sharing that way, um, in fact, I saw a picture. I haven't posted it yet because I'm supposed to actually draw it with these stick figures of what it is like. Four different ways. So you have when two people are talking to each other, they're either putting their thoughts out and it loops back of what their ego thought is. And then they think they've given all the meaning to it that it has for them. So you write something, say you write a book, someone reads it, they're giving all the meaning to your book that it has for them. You may not have even intended those meanings, So that's why you have to let go of that and be like, I was only teaching myself by writing that book. Does that make sense? So I've these little stick figures I have to draw and put on Facebook pretty soon. And then if you have two people that are in Holy Spirit mind, they look beyond the body and they see like the great rays or whatever. I mean, I've never seen the great rays, but it's just that idea of they look beyond the body and they know what the other person is and they know what they are, that they're not a body either. And so then there's the sharing in the mind. Otherwise, bodies can't share. They're doing their own thing in their own mind, giving their own meaning to their own stuff. Weird, right?
So we're talking about some very, very challenging thoughts here
They
for
are.
most of us because it's, how does one share what one wants to learn, right?
Mhm. Yes.
How does one do that so that actually you do learn what you want to learn? And at the same time, you're not your own teacher, it's the
Right.
Holy Spirit. So we're here in a situation you were speaking, we're teaching ourselves, but it says our teacher is the Holy Spirit. So
Yep.
we're in a very interesting situation.
Yeah. So I can give you an example of how that happens with me since I've been doing this. And it turned into it actually has like a pattern. And the pattern is that I wake up in the morning and I'll see someone has said something, and then I will just start hearing Holy Spirit, like, and I want to say it, and he is the correction principle. That is the correction principle, to correct our mind to God's mind, right? So he's showing me that correction, and then it just flows out of me to it's like a hearing and a typing with my thumbs, and just all this stuff just starts coming out. And so I'm learning as I'm doing, but I am it at the same time. um but some may look at it that I'm correcting them, or they may feel that they are put down, or they, again, it's on their side that they are thinking that. So I sometimes have to put caveats in there about that that's not what this is about, and be gentle and kind, because I always want to be gentle and kind to myself. So there are no people out there. So what we're they're projections of the one self. So they are me. Everyone's me. Everyone's me, and y'all look out, and everyone is you. So, but they're symbols of a projection that are showing us different things. So I've also seen people argue with me very vociferously, and they will be like, and that word there, like I never use that word. So like sometimes Holy Spirit will just give me these weird words, right? So, but there's a very adamant arguing, and I would ask again inside my mind and say, Holy Spirit, why am I arguing like this? Like, I thought arguing was bad. I thought I was supposed to be doing this. And then he'll say, no, what you're doing is you're seeing like the opposite side of things. You're seeing like the ego argument that is impossible to go home. You were never home. You're always here. And all you have to live for is this place. And that is it. And if you get rid of all of your uh, accomplishments and your goals and things that you were planning, and you don't even believe there's that you know in the relationship that you have a son and you have a husband, that you're going to go insane. And so those would be the same type of arguments that would come up both on Facebook and in my mind, because that's the Holy Spirit side trying to argue to please keep thinking with me. I notice you're not thinking with me as much, and I'm not liking that. You always used to think with me all the time. You were very loyal. Why are you no longer being loyal? So it's very funny. So that's what the Holy Spirit's been teaching me, that so there was this responding back, and then from their side, they may need whatever they're learning from that. So there's never a mistake, um, even when it looks as if it's like a drawn out argument. Although Holy Spirit, when I answer back, does not tend to defend. It just keeps repeating. But the other thing I found that was very interesting in teaching myself is that the more you get towards non duality, it's almost a different language and it's a different thinking. And then those that will speak in a duality language will not really be able to hear you, and they will think that you're crazy or you can't be doing what you're doing. And then that's when, especially that first paragraph in workbook page 155 became so important for me, where it talks about, how you are like, you're in the world but not of it, and that those that are like you will know you. They'll notice that you're that, because they're speaking the non-duality language, and that those that have not found it yet, and they're still more in duality, they will think you are as you were before. And then they will accuse you of things that you maybe are no longer even thinking. So that's a really tricky thing. So you just move on and you keep sharing and you keep sharing. I don't know if you want me to tell about my little visions of that Jesus showed me about teaching.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, okay. So, yeah, okay. So early on, when I was arguing with him, but again, it was a decision-making mind. I always want to say that that's that PowerPoint where now you're separated from all the problems. You're like above the battleground, and you're like looking at it all like, oh, there's that whole world thing, and there's something else over there through that other door. So that's the beingness of you. That's the real you that can make decisions and is the mind, right? So I would be arguing, and then I would just see this vision of somewhat like Sermon on the Mount. And again, I was raised Christian, so there was a lot of those kind of allegorical stories and thoughts in my mind from growing up. And I saw like like a Jesus type figure standing on the top of the mountain and speaking to the crowd below, and they're all down there. And some are listening, some aren't. Some are like throwing punches and throwing mud and not even hearing because they're too far away or whatever. And I remember hearing that, well, one of the reasons literally why, a story figure of Jesus as the man that was, you know, part of this illusion story that did that, he had to stand up high, was so you could be seen and you could be heard. I mean, it's just logical, right? So, and then, but I was told, okay, no, but I want you to be down in the crowd where the punches are flying and the mud is being slung. And that's when I was like, oh no, really? Are you kidding me? And he says, no, that's where I want you, because that's where the people are. And I want you to be them and be with them. But you're just going to keep saying this thing over and over again, like a broken record. And yes, you're going to get punched, you get mud all over you, this and that, and none of it will matter. And then I saw a second one where I'm still down there with everybody. And then for some reason, I sit down. I'm sort of in a lotus position on the ground, and most people are standing. And there's still punches in the mud and all this stuff. And then a few people start sitting down, and they're like listening, but I'm still just talking and talking. And then all of a sudden they start talking. They're talking their thing. And then we're just like talking. And there's other people that are busy with the mud and the punches. And I've been there, and I've been that person. And so, my latest one that I just got was I finally understood what Buddha meant by being compassionate to all living things. And that had to do with, he knew he was the dreamer. So when you know that you're the dreamer, um, you have this compassion for all those who are still believing that they're in the dream and that it's real and they're suffering. That was his whole thing about suffering. And how do we get out of suffering? And so that I just literally heard that like 2 days ago from my friend Buddha.
Mhm. Yeah. Wow. Very impressive. So you feel this calling to be among the people, and you had resistance to that. Wow.
Yes, very much
Yeah.
so. And the things that I thought would happen did happen. And then I learned through all that, which was what I was just saying a little while ago, was I learned that there are no people out there, and that what people are telling me, they're symbols sometimes of the ego side of things. And then I would look at that and I'd be like, oh, that's the ego talking again. Do I want to think with those thoughts? And then I'd be like, no, not so happy with those thoughts anymore. And then my mind would switch over to this bright light that has no opposition, and it's the other thought system to choose from. That's also on page 1 of Introduction for Manual of Teachers. It says that there are only two thought systems, and you're constantly demonstrating which one you believe. So it kind of brings it back to this real depth of that's all we're ever doing. It's very simple, but it does require you to like totally give up being you. Except that I still walk around. I do a job. I do all these things. No one would know. No one would know at all. Like at the grocery store.
Uh-huh.
Except I talk to a lot of people at the grocery store. It's funny
Yeah.
because I'm not
It's very,
afraid. Fear goes because you just know you can't be hurt. All these lines that are in the course start, you are them. You don't even try to be them. And when you're in that mind, and then I could easily like walk out this door and in 5 minutes something upsets me, and then I'll go back to taking the world real, and I'll be immersed in it, and I'll completely have no connection with Holy Spirit. But then I'll go again, wait a minute. It's my mind. Do I like these thoughts? No, I don't. Okay. And so no matter what it is, big or small, then I choose to go back to, you know, yeah, because one funny thing is, I everybody's talking about the vaccines, and worldly things and governments and all this stuff. So I am actually a person who heard on the script that I was supposed to get the vaccines, and I did get both of them, right? And I had some certain reactions, and my body is feels a little different now, and and not in like really good ways, and it's like very interesting how that like the guidance is not the guidance is just this is what's coming, and are you going to look at who you're going to look at it with. So you know um so I'm looking at that with Holy Spirit. It's very very interesting because I'm not a body, right?
yeah.
i, I could talk for 5 hours. I better not though.
There's many things to say. Anyways, I don't know what is right for anybody in these topics, right? So I just leave it
No,
at that. So I have to choose for myself. You choose for yourself with
yep,
spirit, and everyone gets might get different answers. So, anyways,
totally.
so I would like to open the floor for questions. Would anyone like to ask a question?
I like to say hi to Sue Anne. Hi, Sue Anne. It's Julio.
Hi Julio, how are you?
Good. How are you? I love how you explain your, Course in Miracles experiences. I just love it. I was fortunate right now to get the email or the connection to connect and listen to you again. Thank you. Just want to thank you for being out there and work on what you're working on, because I know that you are working on it and you're helping me to get up there with you. So I'm right behind you. We're following you. Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I've seen you on a lot of the Facebook pages, and I really appreciate you. And yes, it's basically that a lot of times I just get where I'm supposed to share, like an example or something, right? and and so I never really know what I'm supposed to say and when. And sometimes I'll feel it coming like a river, and then sometimes a few more things have to happen, and then it comes out. And I was explaining how sometimes I'll be responding to someone, but sometimes I'll take a run, and then I'll hear what I'm supposed to say, or something will happen in my life, and then I'm supposed to discuss that. And I didn't even talk for about, was it 2 or 3 days? I didn't, because I was really doing some internal work uh, during like at the end of the weekend in these last few days, and then I posted about that too.
Yeah,
So,
awesome. Well, it's great. Every time I see you posting stuff, I go read it. You have a lot of friends. That's awesome.
oh
You talk to a
yeah,
lot of. That's awesome. I do have one question. Maybe you can
please,
help me with this one here. And
yes.
hopefully soon I can join into Saturday Zoom classes. It's just I do have another Course in Miracles class, but it's in Spanish,
Oh,
and that's.
mhm.
But soon probably I'll join you. The question is, and I'm with you 100%. And you mentioned it just now, how we are one with God, and in reality, there's only God,
That's
right?
right. Correct.
Um,
Yes.
and I believe that. I feel that 100%. But in the Course of Miracles, it does say that the only difference is that he's our father, he's our creator, he created us, and that's the only difference.
Right.
So somehow I feel separation there. Somehow I feel like by listening to that there's a separation, and it may be just the ego trying to force me to believe that there's a separation because it's unconscious, right? But how will you explain that? How do he's the God is our father, but we are one with him. How do we, you know,
Yes.
see that difference? It's just I don't want to see that difference. I know I'm one with God, and I don't want to see it or
I
hear it.
know. I hear you. Yeah, because I've struggled with that too sometimes. Yeah, because yeah, the ego loves to say that, then you're lesser than, because well, God's the whole thing, and and you're just some other part or something. And many religions really emphasize that even heavier. But okay, so I love some of the explanations where the in fact, I was listening to some Ken. It was some of the Saturday morning Zooms we were doing. So Ken Wapnick was doing Journey Through the Text, and we were in chapter 28. So I don't even remember where it was in it, but the discussion became how that it was about cause and effect. So God is the cause, and we're the effect. So God thinks love, and then we're the love that he thinks. So another way to think of like the sun, and we're the rays of the sun. And so you cannot have the sun cannot be the sun without the rays coming out of it. And the rays can't just sit there without there have been a sun, to emanate from. Okay. And then so this cause and effect thing. So the cause is love, and the effect is love. So it's so intertwined, it is inseparable, is what it was being discussed. And so when I feel that now, like thinking about that in the Holy Spirit mind, um yeah, it just feels like one thing, and you can't notice a difference. And yet there's also like some kind of a gratitude um for there being a cause without it being an upset. So I think it even comes back to that wonderful line in the course of uh, love is the way I walk in gratitude. And Ken and them were would say that a lot, that would be their main point that they did in those last few years when he was alive, and they're working over there at the center, and they're walking around doing stuff. They got to answer emails and answer the phone and sell a book and all this stuff, right? And but that they had this gratitude that there was this other way and that the world wasn't real. So I think there's that gratitude with that. So I am not fully maybe knowing that. I feel a feeling now, right, as I'm talking about it, but I still have some resistance myself that I would and will take the Holy Spirit and say, what is this resistance? And that's what I would advise to you too, is take that darn thing, say, like, I am resistant to this. What do you think? Intimately work in your mind with the Holy Spirit and just hear what he has to say. And it might come in little bits, maybe not the whole thing at once, and that'll be part of your journey, right?
Yeah, totally, totally. You know what? You put in that example of the sun emitting the rays,
Yes.
made it like yeah, it's one thing. It's just extending, right? And that
Extending.
and that also brought me made me remind me of how the course talks about we also have creation, so we also are expanding, so we're the race suspending and pushing through as a
Yes.
light in a hole. That, thank you very much, Sue, and
Yes.
that a lot. Thank you.
Good. Makes me feel good too. Whew, yes. Thank you, Julio.
Thank you,
Any other
Sue.
questions?
We'll connect soon on that Zoom. It sounds like I really want to go over that Kip One book. Thank you.
Yes, I know it's magnificent because it gives us a nice focus too of a topic.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. My friend Tina's on
That was
here. Yeah,
beautiful. Yeah. Hey, Sue Anne. It's like you knew I was going to talk.
I know.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I just had a comment or question, I guess. I'm just having a week where I'm unable to sleep and I'm just getting more and more tired. So I find it more difficult to catch the ego thoughts and stop them. But I still feel an underlying peace. And I just wondered if you could speak on how the ego thought system likes to retaliate and maybe some
Yes.
of your difficulties that you've had.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And it will like throw like a curveball or something, you know, um, something you hadn't expected. Like, I've not had that particular one, but oh God, I'd hate that if I couldn't sleep for a week. And you're right. And then you get more and more tired. And then the ego thought system is just so much more uh there. Let me tell you a funny um example. This may not exactly answer your question, but it's a funny thing. Okay, so I sometimes will take melatonin, and it's like magic, it's in the world. But I also ask Holy Spirit, like, what is good about magic? Sometimes it really works. And so the idea was that it lets your mind like relax and say like you did something, and then it can accept the truth. I think I've read that somewhere else too, but that's what he told me. And then I think it confirmed because I think I remember it somewhere else. But anyway, so I was at the grocery store and I was just walking along and I happened to see, like, I ran out of my melatonin and I saw this other one. It's kind of like a spray. I don't know, whatever. You're supposed to spray it in your mouth. But if anybody doesn't know what melatonin is, it's your hormones that help you go to sleep. And, uh, you know, and one can take them and get sleepy and sleep, right? Okay. That's the principle behind it. It makes the brain feel sleepy. So I got the thing, and I like, I've always like 24/7, I'm listening to the voice, listening. And so it was like, yeah, you're supposed to get it. Okay. So I get it. And remember, it's not always like it's good advice, like it's not like always benevolent. I mean, and there's nothing that's not benevolent, but it's just that sometimes we think that we know what's best for us, right? So I get this thing, squirted it in my mouth last night. Oh my gosh, it was like I'd had THC or something, which I had tried before with the CBD oils. And my what I had about, oh my gosh, 6 hours, I think, of my thoughts, uh, ego thoughts coming, every mean thing, all kinds of mean things. And I was just watching them. And it just did this really odd thing to my physical brain thoughts, right? And then I also even saw this weird thing about a gas accelerator that you could press on the gas and you could accelerate your thoughts or slow them down. And I was like, okay, that's really weird. And I'm like, I just want to go to sleep, right? Like, seeing all this stuff. If I'm laying in bed, the lights are out, everything, probably my eyes are closed. Probably people would think I was asleep. So anyway, then I saw all these different other thoughts that make up edges of our life, and they help to hold us in an ego thought system so that we don't feel like we're just floating. And and there are problems, and there are all these issues we have, and so those are all holding us in. And I was seeing all that, and finally it wore off, maybe after about 4 hours. Maybe it wasn't 6, it was about 4, and then I really did sleep at the end of that. But and of course I will never take that stuff again, but I was like, wow, isn't that interesting, all the stuff I learned from that thing. So I would say, if you haven't tried melatonin, it's a thing to try that's natural. But I'm not here to give advice on stuff like that. But and if you got to use magic. But there's always something to be learned. And sometimes when the ego comes and attacks like that so strongly, you just go in your uh, decision making mind and you just look at it. Ken would always say, just walk around in your day, see all the ways you don't want to work the course. Don't try to be like, well, I'm a course student now, so I have to be happy all the time. No, like, look, oh God, I hate that person. Just like look around, like, oh wow, look at that hate. Interesting. Again, do I want to think those thoughts or not? And then with each little thing, you could move over, but it is hard when you're exhausted. I understand, Tina. Gosh.
Thanks, Sue Anne. That really helps. I
Oh,
love that.
good.
Just look at your thoughts
Yep.
and look at what you think and what you dislike. Yeah, no, I
Yes.
I definitely don't think doing the course makes you happy while you're undoing the ego. I think it blows up your life, and everything that you thought you loved, you hate. It's like, or you get nothing out of it anymore.
Exactly.
It's actually terrible, but I want to keep doing it.
I know, it's weird. It's like
Yeah,
that there's going to be a good thing at the other end. And then all
yeah,
these thoughts that are coming up, they were always there, but they were covered over by busyness, by love relationships, by alcohol, by food, by going to a movie. They were covered all that time. So they're really nothing new. They've always been there. Actually, now we're looking at it. Finally.
finally.
Yeah.
Kudos to you, Sue Anne. You're awesome. I love you.
Thank you. I love you too, Tina.
Yeah. Another thought for you, Tina. You can write things down. You can write through the process. You can write all about what's going on and see what answers come. You can write all your frustration, all your questions, all of that down, and then let whatever comes in flow. That is very helpful to me.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very, very good. I have so many methods to do it, and that's why I would say just check out all kinds of teachers. And it was Mark Palmer one time posted about, oh gosh, 20 different processes that people have for how to do the forgiveness process. And some will use imagery, some will write, some will use a poem, a mantra, some will meditate. Gosh, whatever works. You're in charge of your curriculum, right?
Any other questions before I continue with more? Okay, then let's continue on.
Okay. Yes.
So you have been speaking a lot about all this conflict that can come up when you are sharing about whatever comes to your mind, whatever is going on. And I think one of the big things is that the teacher of God doesn't have to be someone who is awake yet. It can
Correct.
be someone who is awakening, or actually just asking to wake up,
Yes.
or wanting to wake up.
Right. Yes. And what I found is that, and maybe other people find it a different way, but it is not so much um, lessening what the ego says and strengthening the other side, because it appears that they're both totally, I almost want to say self-sufficient. I don't know where those words came from, but they're totally unto themselves 100%, and they don't share and they don't help each other. So it's a matter of which one are you looking with. So I found that as you're awakening, you look more and more through the day in Holy Spirit mind, whatever the heck you want to call that. We have to have some kind of wording for it. Although that is one kind of I made up, and then people didn't like that for a while. I got a lot of attack about that. That was so funny, right? But I'm just basically describing the holy instant that would go on for many instances, that then would look like an hour, or it would look like 2 hours, or a day. And so if one starts out 100% always looking with ego, and then they have 1 second in 1 month where they saw God, and they were in that mind, then they'll never be the same again. And then that second, you're going to expand on that. And I've often talked about it like pearls on a necklace. So the holy instant is like one pearl. You're like, oh, wait a minute, I'm completely somewhere else. Like I got my eyes open, but everything like looks like a dream, and I know it's not real. My mind is resting somewhere else. And I mean, there's the kind of thoughts that go through your mind, but you really don't have any thoughts. But that would be the thoughts if you said it out loud. But you're just sort of like, ooh, and then if one can string those together, and pretty soon there is no gap in between, I would suppose that would be called enlightenment, whatever the heck that means. And I don't really care anymore. And I've talked to people that they don't really care anymore. You just want to proceed on, is all you want to do. You want to proceed on and have more of that. And you don't care if it takes 10 more lifetimes, and people are like comparing lifetime. Oh, is it in this lifetime or another time? That is if you believe in reincarnation and all that. So, but yeah, so I never can make the ego nicer. Or that was one thing I did earlier in my life. I would see the bad, and I would always see it as the glass half full. So I would always be the one who said, "Oh, it's not that bad, that we have no meat in the house. We'll make beans. Hooray!" And I would like make a happy thing out of it, right? But so what I found out, that I was still believing in the lack of the meat, and I had never let that go. So just trying to make the bad gooder. I don't think that's a word, an English word, but if you're just trying to do that, it doesn't. You're still maintaining the belief in your subconscious of a lack and a separation. I don't have something, and I need to get it. Somebody else has got it. They've got more than me. I better go get it from them. All that, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's very helpful, because that's one of the typical ways you want to be positive in, and
Yes.
realize that you're putting yourself down in the process.
Yes. Yeah. And then, but I think that, and also, don't, if you do it, don't beat yourself up about it. And there's only one line in the course that I know of that talks about, like, don't beat yourself up, and you've been doing the best that you can. Those are the meanings I get out of it, but it has to do with, let's see if I can quote it again without, I have the book beside me, but without opening it, let me see if I can quote it. But it's the idol you do not want, but the thing that it represents you do want, and you do indeed have the right to ask for. So in other words, we were going at it in the wrong way. We thought that I'll get a bunch of money, and then for sure I'll feel better. I won't feel fear because I'll have a bunch of money. and I'll do that. And then one seeks out for, because one could spend your whole life seeking that out, right? Or even 1 year or 10 years or whatever. So let's say you just decide to do that. And, and so you go off on that tangent, and, so it's an idol, but what you're seeking is that God feeling, that filled up, completely whole, nothing missing, everything fine, complete innocence. That's what you're seeking. So you have the right to seek it. So that's the only line that I see in the whole course that talks about, like, don't beat up on yourself. You are asking the right questions, and you have the right to ask for it. It's just you don't really want the idol. And like Tina was saying, then you finally realize that everything that were these idols, then one by one they fall. you know like, oh, I'll have a romantic relationship and that'll do it. I'll be one with this other person in body and motion and spirit, and oh, that fell apart. And one by one they fall. And then you realize, well, why go for another one of those? And then you do get to a place where it's kind of like the world is almost like cardboard, because you're like, there's nothing else to look for here. And it's like trying to say, there never was a world. Go inside, you know
Yeah, very, very powerful statement.
hmm That's not
Mhm.
Sue Ann saying that. Little Sue Ann. Oh my God. I always say a little, Sue Ann personality is a hater. She just hates everything. She hates everyone. She hates everything. Oh my God.
Who doesn't know that voice in themselves?
Yeah.
Everyone does.
I
Anyways,
know, right?
so I think we're coming to the point where we will slowly come to an end. So
Okay.
I think the statements that you've made about our oneness, about how we are we are one with the Father, the parent, or however you want to call it, the creator, and how at the same time, while we are experiencing ourselves as in the dream, we we also need to recognize where we come from. While
Yes.
when we return, there will be no difference, or we won't know the difference because there will be no need for that.
Right. Right. I can give you one more little example of something, if we have a moment, that just popped in my mind that would be good to share about this. And it was actually uh so, like, when I say Jesus or Buddha like comes to me and tells me something, these are symbols in my mind, in your mind. And they're very positive symbols that I'm very open to. If it was a tree, then it would be a tree. But I just am not really a pantheist, and so, but pantheists might have learned about rocks and trees and crystals, and that's great too. But so when I say Jesus like would talk to me, this is what I mean. So I had wondered in the Bible if he was enlightened already. Why did he sometimes go off to pray, as it would say? Especially, I think, even on the night when he was handed over to the authorities, in Jerusalem, and on that Friday night of the Passover, right? He went off by himself to pray and left the guys over there, and they all fell asleep. If people remember that story. And so I wondered that for a long time. And so then I finally got the answer like yesterday morning. And he was letting me know that it's not praying in the way that you think. He just was going to go be with his father. So, like, quieting the mind, shutting the eyes, and just being in that oneness. Um, and then I wondered, why did he need to do that if he couldn't he do that as he was walking around? He says, while you still have a body, you will still have things to attend to. There's lists to make, there's plans to do. And you may be hearing the plans that you're supposed to do from that higher source, but there's nonetheless shoes to put on, bread to go buy. And so he was telling me how that would give him, when he was still appearing as a body, it gave him that pure non-duality moments in time. I thought that was really beautiful. And it's like, oh, see, that helps me to know how I live here when I have to go and answer the phone, and I've got to answer an email and all the stuff we all do, So I don't look any different. I'm the same as y'all.
Yeah, well, the Course is very clear about everyone being equal.
Exactly.
So there's no specialness according to the Course's message.
No
Say the
special.
Holy Spirit says there's no one is special and there's no sacrifice needed,
Oh.
because sacrifices don't get you anything
Mm.
that you would ever want to have.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, I think we can leave it at that. I will ask you, how can people reach you if they want to reach you?
Yes, I actually do have a Facebook Course in Miracles page that I reluctantly created, and I was told the name of it. I didn't even like the name, but it's called Course Talk with Sue Anne. And so I'm over there, but you'll mostly find me in with everyone on other people's Facebook pages. And in fact, like I said, the Zoom that I lead on Saturday mornings, which is 11 a.m. Central, it's through Living A Course in Miracles audio book club, is my great friend Jared Krebs's thing that he started. And we have a history that goes way back. So he's been generous and gentle enough to allow me to be the host. He does the Friday night one, and I do the Saturday morning. And so that's the way it was to be, that I was not really to have my own thing exactly, but that's where y'all can find me.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you everyone for listening. Please review the podcast on whatever platforms you're listening to it on so that more people find it, and spread the word, please.
And thank you
And
so much for letting me be on.
yeah, I'm so happy you agreed to join me here.
Yes. And Holy Spirit's very happy. He always has a lot to say, but he says the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, but it may sound different every time.
Yeah, exactly. Hmm.
Okay,
Thank you
so
again.
thank you. Blessings to everyone, and till next time.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Have a good one.